back to our big story, and there are mounting calls for the Commons Speaker to be suspended after a ceasefire debate saw the chamber descend into utter chaos last night.
The operation of Standing Order number 31, which governs the way amendments to the Opposition Day motions are dealt with, reflects an outdated approach. You'll be going and not be voting.
Well, that's the first one to leave, then. If you want to, do it.
He lost control completely. That's all the MPs storming out there. Sir Lindsay Hoyle has since apologised for breaking with convention and allowing a Labour amendment on the SNP's motion.
But nearly 60 MPs now say they have no confidence in Hoyle, accusing him of allowing Keir Starmer to hijack the proceedings to stave off a Labour rebellion. Well, today, the leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, slammed the opposition for putting pressure on Hoyle. We couldn't get that clip. We'll try and get it to you. I think it's pretty important what Penny Mordaunt has said. But the gist of it, basically, is that Sir Keir Starmer is absolutely wrong to have gone behind the scenes and said to, if this did happen, said to the Speaker, change convention. If you don't, there'll be blood on your hands. Well, joining us now is Conservative MP for Devizes, Danny Kruger, one of those who has today signed the motion of no confidence in Lindsay Hoyle. Danny, great to have you on the show. Devizes, one of my favourite places on earth, regular visitor there. You don't have faith in Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Why is that? And how do you also respond to what is creeping out today, which Starmer denies, that the Labour Party said to him, essentially, our MPs will be threatened if we don't have our particular amendment to vote on?
Well, I have some sympathy for Lindsay Hoyle personally. I think he's a very decent man and he's tried to be impartial. And he certainly cares about the security of MPs, which is very, very important. My concern, however, is that he appears to have caved into pressure from the Labour leader. And let's be clear where the real problem lies. It is the threat by violent people against MPs, and then the use of those threats by the Labour leader to put pressure on the Speaker, making use of his well-known concern for our security, to change the procedures of the House of Commons. And that is a very, very important, very bad thing that's happened. We've allowed the threat of political violence to influence our democracy, and that is the end of our democracy if we allow that to happen.
Absolutely.
So I'm afraid that I can't have confidence that the Speaker is doing his job impartially. Let's see what happens. This story isn't over. As I say, the real problem, I think, lies with the behaviour of the Labour Party. But as things stand, given what we know, I'm afraid to say I can't have confidence that the Speaker is doing his job impartially as he needs to.
What would be nice, Danny, to emerge from this murky situation would be the truth. I mean, we know we saw Speaker Hoyle disappearing into that little room behind the Speaker's chair with Keir Starmer. Sue Gray, the Labour Chief of Staff, was also seen loitering in the cloisters, talking to all sorts of MPs. Now Lindsay Hoyle, I believe, is indicating that he wasn't put under pressure by Starmer, who we're told said to him, listen, if you don't allow our amendment, that will put MPs' lives at risk. It will put them in danger. So, OK. So if that's the case, then Hoyle made this decision himself. So why then did he say, I'm going to allow Labour's amendment because not allowing it is outmoded? Why didn't he tell the truth? So somewhere is the real story, and we are not getting it.
Yes, I don't know what conversations were had behind closed doors. All we know is that conversations went on. They went on for quite a long time. At the beginning of yesterday's crazy scenes, there was a 10-minute rule motion debate, the normal procedure that happens on a Wednesday afternoon, a small uncontroversial bit of legislation being debated. Labour chose to spin that out for about an hour and indeed to vote against it. It was a bill about community transport, nothing anyone can object to. So that was in order to create time for the conversation that Keir Starmer was having with the Speaker to go on. So I'm afraid it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense that the Speaker had made a decision early in the day that he then implemented. He clearly made a decision in quite quick time just before the debate started. It does seem obvious to me that he came under significant pressure because the decision he took was one that was in favour of the Labour Party, which they have their own opposition days. It's notable they never use those to call for ceasefires in Gaza. They tabled their own amendment yesterday in order to give their MPs the opportunity to vote for a ceasefire, but not in the terms that were proposed by the SNP, which would be unacceptable. So I'm afraid to say it is blatant politics that was going on, and it was to the great discredit of the House of Commons in the eyes of the public. And that's why I'm afraid I don't think the Speaker can have our confidence until we get to the bottom of it. It might be that there's further information to come out. Ultimately, we need to know what Keir Starmer's role in all of this was.
One thing we do know, Danny, Alex, is that that Lindsay Hoyle's clerks told him don't do this. He chose to overrule them. This is not a good look for Lindsay Hoyle. I mean, I think he's a decent man, but I think in this, the story we're being told, he's shown weakness. And we can't have a weak Speaker. Do you think he'll survive?
Well, let's see. I mean, I think it is difficult. There's now, I think, over 60 people have signed this motion declaring no confidence in him. The leader of the House we've just heard this morning, but paying tribute to him personally, as I do too, by the way, I think at the moment is keeping her own counsel. Obviously, Labour very supportive of him, the SNP calling for him to go. Listen, fundamentally, the difficulty of being in politics is that the personal is political. We all represent positions, and we can say that so-and-so is a very decent person or honourable or has the right intentions. But if they represent a position, which in this case is that the Labour Party can be able to use the threat of political violence to change the procedures of the House, I think that makes his position untenable. But as I say, there's more to come out. As things stand, I don't have confidence in him. Maybe that can be restored by further disclosures, and I certainly want to get to the bottom of what the role of the Labour Party was in all this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And if it does transpire, if we do ever get evidence of the fact that the Labour Party used that threat of political violence in order to force the Speaker to change convention, then they are surely as bad as the extremists and the zealots who are bringing sectarianism into our politics. My worry here is that Sir Keir Starmer's not got a vote of no confidence.
Well, I'm afraid the accusations that I level at Lindsay Hoyle, at the Speaker, which are being partisan and weak, really apply even more so to Keir Starmer. The fact is, he was unable to achieve unity in his own party, unable to recognise that many of his own members wanted to vote for a harder motion calling for a unilateral ceasefire in the heart of Israel. If he was genuinely concerned about their security and he thought that the threats of violence should somehow dictate parliamentary behaviour, then he should let his MPs vote for the SNP motion. But what he's actually done in the interest of the Labour Party is to prevail on the Speaker to change process so that they didn't get the vote on the SNP motion, but they got the vote on his motion. So I'm afraid weakness and partisanship and genuinely the willingness to use the terribly divided politics that we have in our country at the moment, the presence of people who really don't follow democratic norms, to use those for partisan purposes, I think is really disgraceful.
Yeah, but by the way, let's remember, as I said, my point is, why didn't he say, look, MPs' safety is at risk here, and therefore I'm going to break with convention. I'm going to allow both these amendments because I think we can show it right now. As the chaos was unfolding in Parliament, as MPs were debating Gaza, projected onto House of Parliament was from the river to the sea. And there was an angry pro-Palestine mob outside. So Lindsay Hoyle just should have cited all that and said, I've been warned that the MPs' lives are at risk, they're in danger here, therefore I'm going to break with convention. Instead, he just said, I think it's old-fashioned and outmoded. That is not going to behave him well, is it?
Well, he did say, I think he has been saying that the reason for the decision he took was because of the threats to MP security. He keeps reiterating that he takes that very seriously, which I genuinely believe. But the right response to a threat to MP security is to enhance our security, to think who is being targeted, to ensure that the police are properly cited on all of this, and to protect the House of Commons, not to respond to the mob outside by changing process and letting them essentially have their way. So, yes, we need to take security seriously, but the But fundamentally, we need to protect the security of debates in the House of Commons. That's the rule of law on which our democracy depends. So I think it was a legitimate concern. Of course, we should be very concerned. Tragically, we've had murders, political murders of MPs in the last decade. But the right response to that is to enhance security directly, not to adapt the House of Commons.
Yeah, my problem is that the reason he gave the House was he thought that only allowing one amendment is outmoded. Now, that doesn't seem to be the case. Can you bear with us, Danny, because we're going to have a look at Penny Mordaunt, Leader of the House, and what she said about all this morning.
If the honourable lady opposite cannot bring herself to reflect on the appalling consequences of her party's actions yesterday, if she cannot rise above the narrow and immediate needs of her weak and fickle leader, to fulfil her duties to this House as its shadow leader, perhaps she might like to reflect on the damage her party has done to the office of the Speaker. Never have done to him what the Labour Party have done to him.
Well, I think she makes a very good point. But going back to that projection on the side of Parliament, from the river to the sea, we all know means essentially wiping Israel off the face of the earth. How is it we've reached a stage now that is being projected on the side of our Parliament when we're having a debate about a war 2,500 miles away that we've got no impact on whatsoever? Is this not neglect from both sides of the House at addressing this problem the minute those pro-Palestine marches happen, sticking their heads in the sand and hoping it would go away?
Well, as you know, Alex, there's been a lot of debate about what's tolerable in terms of these protests. And I spoke with and supported the position that Suella Braverman took regarding these protests. I think there's been a dereliction of duty on part of the police to allow protests to go ahead that are plainly inconsistent with civil order and the rule of law in our country. And I think last night is another example of that. I hope there'll be a proper investigation into how those projections came to be made, why they weren't immediately interrupted. And I hope that the police are pursuing the people responsible now. It's absolutely unacceptable to use our national parliament to display these blatantly unacceptable messages, and let the whole episode, what happened in Parliament, the threats being made to MPs and the demonstrations last night and every Saturday, in fact, let them all be a wake-up call for us to recognise that we have a significant problem of public order and of legitimate democratic discourse in our country. And we need to reassert the absolute rights of parliamentarians to go about their business without being frustrated in this way, and not to allow unacceptable displays like we saw last night.
And if the stories that we are hearing about what Sir Keir Starmer was up to, his sort of Machiavellian machinations behind the scenes, if they're true, he must look back on this and think, I completely screwed this up. I made an absolute mess of it, because the Speaker certainly feels that he made a mess of it. Let's listen to Lindsay Hoyle's excruciating apology.
I will reiterate, I made a judgment call that didn't end up in the position where I expected it to. I regret it. I apologise to the SNP. Just bear with me for a moment. I apologise, and I apologise to the House. And it has been said, both sides, I never, ever want to go through a situation where I pick up a phone to find a friend of whatever side has been murdered by terrorists.
So that was his apology. He realised he made a mistake. So if we accept the story, Danny, do you think Sir Keir Starmer today will be rueing what he got up to yesterday?
Well, he certainly should be. I think the growing consensus is that the behaviour of the Labour Party yesterday was disgraceful.
Agreed.
And the pressure that he himself clearly put onto the Speaker was wrong. I don't think the Speaker should have caved into that pressure. But ultimately, I mean, let's be clear, the real responsibility lies with those who are making threats against MPs. But the response by the Labour leader to say that we should respond to those threats by adapting our procedures was very, very wrong. And I think if it does appear that he put undue pressure, which I'm sure he did, frankly, but if the evidence appears for that, then I think his position is also untenable. It's absolutely unacceptable for a party leader to use threats of violence to subvert our democratic processes.
Danny Kruger, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.